Hello everyone, welcome to Winthrop in the World. I'm Paul Baskin, and with us today is Shahjehan Khan. Shahjehan is a resident of Winthrop, also an actor who's got at least two major projects going on or just finished, one on Hulu, one on Netflix. Maybe Shahjehan, would you willing to tell folks what it is you're working on and what you got going?
Yeah, for sure. So like Paul said, I've been a resident. I'm looking here.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, here. It's okay. Yeah.
You want to start over?
I got it. No, it's fine. This is hilarious. You should keep this in. I have been a resident of Winthrop now for I think about 12 years. I'm an actor, musician, a podcast producer, a son, a husband, a parent to a cat, and the reason I'm on the show today is to talk about some really fun stuff that's been going on in my acting career lately, the last few years, which includes my first major recurring role on Hulu's Deli Boys, which is the first ever Pakistani-American crime show. They call it like a crimedy, which is I think like a word that they invented like for the show.
It's a comedy, but it's also pretty dark.
Yeah, it's kind of like dark comedy. It's kind of like Sopranos, but it's just like about this like Pakistani American drug dealing family. I think it's pretty hilarious.
Right. I'm in Philadelphia, just set in Philadelphia.
Yeah, set in Philadelphia. We shot it in Chicago.
And it's two brothers who they grow up wealthy, don't really realize why. Their dad just runs a convenience store, and they find out after he dies that who's actually running a drug business, and they have to take it over.
Exactly, that it was like a front for cocaine trafficking all across the country.
Right.
Hilarity ensues. There's a lot of like amazing actors on the show that I grew up, admiring, like whether it's the two leads, but Poorna Jagannathan, Brian George, a lot of people know from Seinfeld, and then just like a whole host of
Chris Elliott from Something
are you
Married.
Kidding? Yeah, Tim Baltz from Righteous Gemstones. So it was like an honor and like a dream come true to do the show, and also just an incredible ensemble cast. So I'm in about 7 of the 10 episodes. It came out.
You're one of the sort of the leaders of the crime gang.
Yeah, I'm kind of like Chris Moltisanti or Uncle Paulie for anybody that's seen like The Sopranos.
Yeah.
So that's one big project. Then recently, some of you might have, those of you that still read physical newspapers, might have seen me in the Winthrop transcript, which some members very graciously from my old friend Yahya Noor, who is the owner of Tawakkal Halal Cafe in East Boston. He actually linked me up with with Carrie Schumann, who very graciously wrote a feature piece on me when my movie came out a few weeks ago. It's called Aftermath. It's a crazy action.
That's the one on Netflix.
Yeah, it's on Netflix now. It's this insane sort of like action thriller, hostage crisis thing. It was my first really feature film I did with lines, and I got to be this like pretty crazy action hero. I had like a stunt double and stuff, and it's like a pretty I still can't believe that it ended up going to #1. It was just kind of this like, it was this indie movie which we didn't really like know what was going to happen with it, and then it went to #1 on the U.S. charts, and then it went #3 like globally. So just the fact that those two things have happened kind of like one after the other is like a really big step in my career. I've been, in the arts in some way or another since I'm 41, so since I was like 6 or 7, since I first started like making fun of my parents and aunts and uncles, at like family dinners and stuff.
So let's go back, because just to let people know where you're from. So you grew up in Boxborough, which is, and then you went to the Boxborough, Acton Boxborough.
Yeah, I grew up in Boxborough. District.
Right, which is out west of Boston, right around 495.
Yeah.
So you grew up there. You also have a podcast that sort of gives some of your life story, what went on there, kind of what went on during 9/11 when you were in high school.
Yeah, so my parents are immigrants from Pakistan. They came here in the 1970s. My dad studied at MIT. My mom came in 79, and I was born in 83. And then a couple years later, they moved from Cambridge and Arlington to Boxborough, and that's kind of where we grew up, in like suburban Massachusetts. And it was like a pretty, at the time, it was not, it was a pretty sort of like homogenous place. So we were definitely like maybe one of the only South Asian families there, and and it's a typical experience for first generation people all across the country. And yeah, I do, like you mentioned, I do have a podcast about my kind of like life story called King of the World. My name, Shahjehan, actually means king of the world. It was named after the guy who built the Taj Mahal in India. And so a company asked me in early 2021 to make like a narrative podcast series about my life growing up, kind of coming of age post 9/11. So it came out on the 20th anniversary. And it deals with a lot of things. So, you know, like I'm also someone who's very open about being in recovery. So I've been sober 14 years. And so it kind of like charts my journey through just growing up, dealing with all that stuff, and kind of like to where we are now.
And going to, we're fellow UMass Amherst students, but you went mostly to UMass Lowell
because I dropped out of UMass Amherst.
Which happens a lot for people first time, but I mean, but part of it is your story in terms of your, sort of the trauma of your upbringing after 9/11 a little bit. And then getting into a band, starting a band.
Yeah.
The Caminas?
Yeah, the Caminas. So the band kind of just means scoundrel, and it was kind of sort of like a Sex Pistols type tongue-in-cheek band that we kind of like started in 2003 or 2004. You know, we wrote about all sorts of things. We wrote about whether it was Bollywood, you know, train robberies or, you know, funny stuff like that, but also, you know, quote unquote political music too. And we became this somewhat of like an underground sensation, you know, like we had a documentary made about us. And
well, you toured around the country. You went
around the world.
Around the world. Yeah, right. No, it did very well for a while, right? It's still going. Is that right? It's been
the band. We don't do that much anymore. We're not. We sort of went on hiatus. We did have our celebrate our 20th reunion this year, so we actually will be coming out with, I think, a little bit of new music. But I now play with a rock band in Providence called Ravi Shavi. I'm a session guitar player with a bunch of other different artists and stuff, and I still make a lot of music.
Yeah, so. And so the Caminas, looking at some of the lyrics of what they sing about. I mean, it's punk, so it's some of the language is pretty rough. Some of the thoughts are. I mean, is there a way to sort of just describe what you thought you wanted to get out of the Caminas in terms of the message you were putting out to the world?
I mean, it's just, you know, our version of being young people mad at stuff. So we wrote some punk music. I definitely like the Clash, like the Sex Pistols.
Right.
Very much in the same vein.
And then you went through a lot. You moved back. You moved to Pakistan for a while.
Yeah.
Worked. Kind of got some of the music going a little bit there.
Yeah, I call that my Eat, Pray, Love, year, where my bandmate at the time had gotten a job in the news media there. So I kind of went there, as I talk about a little bit in the podcast. I kind of was going nowhere. I was a college dropout, struggling with substances and stuff, and so I decided to move there, and we started making music, and I started working in journalism and also playing with different bands and stuff, and having like a radio show. It was also like it's an important experience that I feel very lucky to have grown up speaking the language in Pakistan. You know, I think it happens often that like first generation folks maybe aren't as connected because maybe their family, everybody's here, or maybe they're just not in touch with the language and stuff. So my parents did a really good job of like making sure we spoke, you know, Urdu and Punjabi and stuff. Right. So I was able to, and I was fortunate to be able to go back there and live for a bit, not with my family, but kind of like with my bandmate. You know, we had like an apartment. Right. And that's really where I started to form a connection with Pakistan that's kind of like outside of family. Okay. And so it's something that I really cherish to this day. And I'm actually working on another podcast right now about the Pakistani music scene in the 1960s and 70s in Karachi.
I see. Is there anything to sort of just generally tell people to expect from that?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a show about like groovy nightlife and like psychedelic rock bands and just like really cool hipster aunties and uncles and stuff. So,
yeah. I'm sure a lot of people don't have even a baseline for know where to put that.
I mean, we didn't even know that some of like growing up. Like I heard a little bit about the history of before alcohol and stuff was banned in Pakistan. You know, following whatever, you know, like the rise of the first military dictatorship and stuff. There was a thriving sort of nightlife and rock clubs, and you know, it was like a very like international, you know, safe city, you know, right. the Pakistan that my parents remember.
Yeah, and your parents, I mean, just from the podcast, they seem like wonderful people who are really, for someone who struggled as you did with various things that you talk about quite bluntly in the podcast. Your parents were, and your father, I guess, well, both of them really, and your grandmother too, right? Were just phenomenal supports for you, it sounds like.
Yeah, I would be nowhere without my family. I'm very close with my parents, my sisters. I have two younger sisters, so I owe all of my success all to them, and they couldn't be more proud. You know, so it's funny. We actually just had we had our own premiere party for Deli Boys this past Friday at Zoomix in East Boston, where we screened a few episodes. And my mom and sisters actually bought. So in the show, my character he wears this like red velvet tracksuit, which is actually pretty hilarious. So I'd been traveling for a couple of months because we premiered at Sundance and then LA and then New York. And then I came back to do like my own kind of like hometown premiere thing. And my mom and sisters had bought matching red velvet tracksuits or like fake velvet, and they had printed and they'd like made like stickers with my face, and just like it was absolutely hilarious.
Yeah,
so they threw me a party. You know what I mean?
I mean, the Deli Boys is just absurd in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's but I mean, it tells a lot of stories. I mean, one theme, in addition to sort of the immigrant experience, if you will, is sort of the way they sort of focus on money above humanity, really.
Sure.
I mean.
But they're just like, I think the way that we've been talking about the show is like, you know, there's been this, I think, and I maybe in the early 2000s with my band, the Caminos, we were kind of not first, but hearing these discussions about like representation and stuff in Hollywood and all this. And, you know, it's 2025 and like the needle has moved forward a lot. But there's never been like, it's a show that's not like heavy-handed about the identity stuff. It's honestly just finally a point where we, as whatever we are, whether it's Pakistani Americans or Muslim Americans or whatever we are, like we can just be idiots and drug dealers and just like morons that aren't necessarily like redeeming people, you know. And actually one of the leads, Asif, who plays Mir in the show, he talks about the fact that, you know, like I never had something growing up where people looked like me that I could sort of like rewatch. Kind of like I was obsessed with like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air or like, I don't know, Full House or like any of these kinds of like sitcom kind of shows. So one thing that's been really cool now that it's been out for almost a week, I guess 5 days, is the feedback we've been getting from people, whether it's South Asians in the US, whether it's just regular you know, run-of-the-mill American people, whether it's people in Pakistan, like it's just like, this is such a cool. And that's all I wanted as an actor, is to just like be able to do something cool, you know, that like would just, I don't know. So I'm just really, really grateful.
Well, I remember you talking in the podcast, I think, about when your early offers to work in TV, and was it a cab driver you were asked to play?
Yeah.
And you
so actually,
sort of wrestled with that.
Yeah. So actually, a few years back, there were two films that came out about the Boston Marathon bombing. One was Patriots Day. One was Stronger. And I had a friend who, and this is actually how I got into, you know, the like Boston industry, was because a friend asked me to come in for an audition for the film, I think Patriots Day, where they were basically just looking for a cab driver. And you know, again, there's nothing wrong with like being a cab. It's not that. It's more that it was just this very tired stereotype of like, you know, one line, no depth, whatever, which a lot of actors a lot of, let's say, you know, actors of color, whatever you want to say, in Hollywood experience like a very kind of, no like depth to roles. So I went in and I did it, and it was like whatever, and I didn't book it or whatever. But so just to look at from how much things have changed in the last 10 years to like fully fleshed out now, where like, you know, like I can be ahead of this like underground ring of, you know, crazy drug dealers.
Yeah, it's you have to see it. I mean, but you remind me too of like this has happened. So like I think of a relative who was going back a long time ago, was an American Indian, and that was the whole thing back then. Hollywood had American Indians play the buffoons in. I mean, this is the story of Hollywood, really.
Yeah. And now you have, you know, and it was actually, I remember. The reason I even went in for the audition is because I had just seen an episode of this other great show called Master of None by the comedian Aziz Ansari, who had a really cool episode about like what it's like to be a you know, my kind of Indian actor in Hollywood, but definitely with the Native American experience for sure too. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, just the fact that people of all kinds of different demographics are asked to play. I mean, certainly the Black Americans experience that too. The stereotypes that they have been put through over the years to get into Hollywood.
But now, and even in another Hulu show, which I love, is called Reservation Dogs, not the movie Reservoir, but Reservation Dogs. It's actually just about life on a native reservation. And the coolest part was that one of the editors of that show is the editor for Deli Boys too, which I was like super stoked.
Okay. So you're talking about progress. I mean, but obviously there's a lot of people who think that in this country right now, treatment of immigrants is not in an upward moment right now.
Look, man, it's been like this. I don't know. You know,
Forever.
it's kind of like it's a pretty dark time now, for various reasons. But I mean, what other options do we have? You know, I'm gonna keep making stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like if you don't like it, that you can just turn it off or whatever. You know what I mean? But like also, I don't know. Like for me, as an artist, whether it's a musician or an actor, like you're gonna just make stuff which is about you and put it out there, and you know it's kind of like I think the thing that a lot of folks talk about is like this idea that growing up that you kind of had to worry about pleasing. You have to make something have broad appeal, right? Like make sure like everybody can get. But what ends up happening is that really like waters down the product. So the real power is in making that thing specific, and like the beauty of it is in the specificity of it. Whether it was like the music we were making in our band, the Caminas, was kind of like stuff that we thought was funny, stuff that was pissing us off politically, things that we wanted to say. Like we sort of like made it for ourselves and for our communities and stuff. In the same way as this particular show, the creator of the show was passed on a million times, and he actually just wrote this as a pilot to just get a staff job. He talks about, but it was just such a Philly show, and it was such a show about him and his experience that it ended up like becoming what it is. And now from that specificity is where people, like in the same way that, I don't know, I can relate to Kevin McAllister in Home Alone. Like why can't someone relate to a Pakistani American drug dealing crime family?
Sure. Yeah.
So why not?
So again, with us today is Shahjehan Khan, a resident of Winthrop. He's obviously got a good acting career going on now. You talk again on the podcast a lot about and you mentioned earlier your struggles with substance abuse, and the acting, I think it's fair to say, was part of your healing from that.
I was really fortunate to. There's a wonderful a local organization. It's now called Second Act. But it was at the time called the Improbable Players. Okay. And they are a theater troupe that specifically empowers actors that are in recovery to tell stories, do plays, drama workshops that are about recovery, and kind of like bring their own experience into it. And so that was a really cool way to have like a gig, when I was like getting out of college and stuff, but also kind of like reignite this, you could say, lost passion, that I'd had since I was a kid.
Since you were a kid, yeah.
So I definitely, and I'm still very active in the recovery community,
Yeah, you sound like someone who could give a high school or a college commencement.
I haven't done a commencement, but I do very fortunately through my podcast. Just a few weeks ago, I was asked to give a little presentation at a school in Acton, where I grew up. And yeah, I love talking to young people. I also I really love talking to young people that are maybe kind of bad kids or whatever, or just people that have kind of messed up a little bit here and there, because I feel like they're some of the smartest, most mature people out there. Right. So I get a lot of energy from young people. I'm definitely someone who I really value young people.
Yeah.
I don't think that this generation is the young generation is has it wrong or backwards or something, or I think they're smarter than all of us.
Yeah, no, I see that. I mean, I've done some substitute teaching here and in Washington D.C. and just the kids you're talking about, who maybe as you look at them quickly seem like the most trouble. When you listen to them, they actually got a lot going on often, and partly what the issue of why they're look troubled is because they're just working hard on figuring things out.
Yeah.
Is there anything, I guess what I was getting at with, is there anything you can say to them, or is there really in a either commencement speech or just to themselves that could really help them, or is it more this kind of thing where you just have to show patience to them and let them?
I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think one thing that I wish I'd paid more attention to for me was trying to find someone who just like one person I could like honestly talk to about stuff, whether it was like a counselor or whether it was even just like an older person in the community or something. Like there's, however like weird I thought I was, or however like terminally unique I thought I was, like that just wasn't the case. Like I needed to kind of hang on, and things were going to eventually work out. But yeah, man, it's not, being young is like really hard.
Right. And obviously you, after...
Especially when you grow up in a town like, I mean, also in a town that's, in my case, was very competitive and focused on like school and sports, and you know, like if you didn't, maybe you didn't get the best grades, or you didn't fit into like that mold of like the like quote unquote all-American whatever, then you know that was going to be hard.
Yeah.
So hopefully my show and my story helps to kind of like complicate that narrative a little bit of like what is even something like, you know, what does the all-American kid even mean, really?
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, yeah. I mean, you had it particularly tough after 9/11, given
a lot of us did.
Yeah, but a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, but I'm thinking about this town. There's a lot. I mean, this town has a large number of immigrants, or immigrant family, or second generation, or even first generation, and so they're really going through a lot of that kind of thing. Maybe more more Hispanic families than Muslim families in this town. I guess I'm just wondering what you can sort of offer to them to sort of help them understand that, you know, look at where you are now. I mean, some of the stuff you talked about going through sound like you had some really low moments. I mean, very low moments, right? And now look at where you are now.
Yeah, I think the difference now is that whether you like it or not, I think like immigrants and people of color or whatever, we're just like out there more, which is I think what pisses people off. So sorry, but also, you know, like, I'll speak for myself, like, as creators, people in media, like, we're the ones telling our own stories now. So there's so many more opportunities for you to, like, feel a part of rather than separate from, you know, like, in a world where, yes, like, if we read the headlines every day, like, who knows what's going to happen next, you know, like, but, like, there's so many, like, whether it's advocacy groups or whether it's, like, you know, community groups or just, like, therapeutic open mics or something, like there are ways for us to belong, you know, and we do like have a lot of allies out there too, man. So it's not that people don't. It's there are, you know, like I think of my dad and my mom, who are both kind of like tireless believers and workers in like interfaith. So like growing up, like, you know, like I would go to youth groups and stuff. And my parents are very much the kinds of people who like to put themselves out there and be like, hey, like, you know, I know you've never like seen anyone like me, and I know that maybe you have this like maybe screwed up idea of who you think I am and like where I'm from and stuff, but let me let you in, you know, to that world. And I think that they sort of instilled that in me. That, you know, like, and that stuff is also, it can be a little bit taxing to like put that on you, to always have like the pressure of like being like, hey, like, come check me out, I'm not that terrible, what's your problem?
Right.
But like, yeah, man, I think there's always like, at least I can speak as a creative person, like, you know, I just came from Sundance, where I just saw some incredible films about like various Muslim communities, whether it's like in a Macedonian village, or, you know, a narrative film from about the Nakba in Palestine, or like whatever. So, yeah, like we're making art, it's there, and people are consuming it and liking it, and so I mean, like, that's just the way it is.
So the new film about what's centered on the Tobin Bridge. Again, the title of that one is
Aftermath.
Aftermath. Can you maybe tell folks a little bit about what that is and what kind of, if there's a message that it's delivering, or if it's just entertainment?
Sure. I would say Aftermath is primarily entertainment. It's about this sort of like thriller hostage crisis on the Tobin Bridge, where a group of military contractors have like taken a bunch of hostages, and it stars Dylan Sprouse, who a lot of people know from like The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody, and Mason Gooding, and Dejan Lockman from Severance, and Megan Stott, and a bunch of really great local Boston actors. So we shot that in 2021, and it was my first experience it was my first time in a feature film where I had like lines and stuff.
I see.
And yeah, it's just like, it's kind of like a feel-good thriller.
Feel-good thriller.
Yeah, maybe it's a little dark.
Yeah,
I don't know what necessarily the feel-good part, but it's very just like, it's kind of like just that kind of like action comedy thing. I don't know about necessarily that there's a message in the sense, but the writer also is a very dear friend of mine now, Nathan Graham Davis.
Yeah.
He's from Western Massachusetts. So yeah, it's just cool that like there's so much happening in the Boston area, because people always ask me, you know, like I think even you did that, like, so when are you going to move to LA or New York? And honestly, like, until 4 or 5 years ago, I thought that, okay, and I do a lot of stuff, I'm not, you know, I have many jobs to survive, so like getting actual like paid acting work is still very new to me, but I was, until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, of the mind that, yeah, eventually if I really want to take this stuff seriously, I'm going to have to move to one of these other markets. But truthfully, after COVID, one thing that happened is a lot of these auditions, most of them you just tape at home,
Right.
as self-tapes, and you know, eventually maybe you have to go in for a camera test or something. So you can kind of, like last year I did Deli Boys in Chicago, I did a film in Denver, I did a TV series in LA, and I can still call Winthrop my home base because it's so close to the airport.
Right.
So, you know.
Yeah, and I would assume after a while do you have to do as many auditions? People now you can just show them.
Oh no, I still audition. Yeah, man.
They can't just, you don't just show them, well, here's what I've.
I hope maybe one day.
Yeah,
but
one
no,
day.
no, I'm very much still a working actor, you know. And yeah.
So you meant the overlap between the Tobin Bridge movie and Deli Boys is the dark humor kind of thing. Is that sort of your sweet spot?
Tobin, I don't know, man. I mean, I've done all sorts of things. So that same year I did Aftermath. I actually did a Lifetime movie, like a murder mystery, which I guess is also kind of dark now that you mention it.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done some comedy. My first TV appearance was on the show Succession.
Okay.
So I got to play like sort of like a New York elite kind of like reporter person.
Okay.
Clearly like yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, elite, right.
But so I think the cool thing that I'm realizing is that I actually do fall into this kind of ethnically ambiguous territory, so I can play a lot of different things. So I'm just kind of seeing where it goes. And ever since I started like bigging my head, I guess it's actually been good. For my career, so.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, you're still got a lot of career ahead of you, I would imagine.
I hope so.
Yeah.
Honestly, if not, I did everything I wanted. Like, I'm honestly telling you, man, like all I ever wanted was to like have a line in a movie and like a TV show. So anything else now, and you very graciously listen to my whole podcast, like the life that I've had, I'm just so thankful to be doing any of the stuff that I'm doing right now. So it's all, I spent my 20s like trying to be super, you know, like my band's got to, you know, whatever. But like, I'm just so excited and like grateful and satisfied with like how I am, how things are going now. So like, hopefully and I think that is the ideal position where you just kind of like, you put good vibes out and, you know.
Yeah, and it comes back to you.
Yeah.
But I was asking about the dark comedy thing, was whether that's sort of a good way to get messages across to people in a way that they are more receptive to.
I think it may be. It's funny you mentioned that because like, and I don't want to speak for him, but I know that the creator of the show, he just loves TV and specifically like comedy and stuff. And I think, there's also, there's this other really incredible animated show which is coming out on Amazon Prime by the stand-up comedian Rami, who had a show called Rami as well. He has the first, like, it's kind of like a Family Guy type show about a Muslim American family. And it looks amazing. I just forgot the name of it. I just saw the trailer.
And do you have a relationship to that, or just as a fan?
No, I don't.
Just
I
as a
don't.
fan,
We definitely are maybe degrees of separation, but I've never met Rami or anything. But it's specifically to what speaks to what you're talking about, because it's kind of like over the top caricature, like if you've ever seen any of those shows like Family Guy or American Dad or whatever. It's that, but imagine that about a post 9/11 Muslim family. And it seems like it's ridiculously hilarious.
Is there something just, I guess they had a clean slate and could walk into either Hollywood or whatever to get what you preferred most? What would that look like? I mean, is there sort of an ideal role you can imagine, an ideal film, or a sort of a genre?
Anything, man.
Anything.
Whatever, if you want to pay me. No. At this point, I'm trying to explore as much different stuff. You know, I've done some. I have a couple of projects in development this year. A couple of independent films where I'm attached, which are a little bit more on the like dramatic side. So I'm just trying to cover all the bases.
Right. It seems like, I mean, you're being an actor, but that given your role with your band and your podcast, that you are potentially a writer too. I mean,
yeah, it's definitely. So I did write a good chunk of the King of the World podcast for sure.
Yeah.
We've had some talks about turning it into a pilot or something, maybe down the line. I don't know, but yeah, I should probably write something. It is sort of a goal that I've had for in the back of my mind for a while. I just do a million things all the time, so I'm kind of like, someday I'll get to it. When the time is right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing that. Shahjehan Khan, thank you very much for joining us
Thanks
today.
for having me, man, and thank you for listening, Winthrop.